Hello, friends. My guest today is one of the most controversial and arguably the most polarizing gay man on the planet, second only to Milo Yiannopoulos. Please welcome Randy Ross.
This is the Powers Project.
这是台湾的 Powers 计划。
日本から The Powers Project.
Aus Deutschland das Powers Project.
Dall'Italia il progetto Powers.
The Powers Project.
Randy, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
That's good.
Awesome to be with you.
Well, it's good to have you. You are probably the most polarizing gay man I know, probably next to Milo Yiannopoulos. Other than him, I don't know of any other gay man who's as polarizing as you and as controversial as you. And it's in part because of your stance in many areas that go contrary to that of the gay community. One, you're a log cabin Republican, correct?
I'm a Republican.
You're a Republican, okay. Beyond being a Republican, you are also the head of
I was the 2016 Orange County chairman for Trump.
There you go.
I currently work, to support the president in the Trump Victory fundraising capacity. And I also am on a conservative radio show. So that's really where my focus is now. 2016 was a very different time. Coming into, this period of time, my goal is to just make sure the president gets reelected.
Okay. So you were hesitant. You didn't say you were a log cabin Republican. So why
just because
is that?
I don't even know. Do we even have that still in Orange County? I remember we used to. It's just not my focus. My focus, I'm a Trumplican. I think it's easier.
Okay.
I think it's easier for me to go in that space because there are parts of the Republican Party I still think need a lot of work when it comes to, especially to LGBT issues. But the reality also is that this president's one of the first president during his acceptance of the nomination actually mentioned gay people in that process. So, you also got to remember that my boss on the campaign in 2016 was a lesbian in a 14-year relationship. She was running the state of Florida. I obviously am an openly gay conservative. You have to remember that I was a Republican until 2002. That's when I came out at the tender age of 36. I'm now, I can say it, I don't care, I'm 54. And I look good for my age. That's okay. But, when you come out of that process, I had people around me, many people that are leaders here in the local LGBTQ process that said, Randy, you can't be a Republican and also be on this side of things. And I listened to them and I kind of went with it. I just came out. I was still going out to the clubs, having a lot of fun. And then I kind of realized I'm from Indiana. I'm a conservative. I grew up in a Pentecostal household. I kind of started thinking backwards a little bit and realizing that I needed to rethink where my politics were. So I went back to the Republican Party in 2014 before Trump came down the escalator. And when he came down the escalator, I was like, how do I help? It just so happened that I got a lead from a local editor of a publication and said, hey, Randy, they're looking for chairman in Orange County. And I'm like, okay, sign me up. And I started sending my emails and calling and they weren't calling me back. And I'm like, it had been a rough year in 2015, right, for me. So I thought, maybe they just don't want me. And then one day I just showed up at the Republican Executive Committee office. And there's a nice little lady sitting back there. And she's like, Randy, can you sit down for a second? She sits down. I sit down and she hands me a manila folder filled with resumes of people who had applied to be the Orange County for Trump chairman. And she goes, they just don't want you to organize in Orange County. I said, me? She goes, no, nobody. Because that wasn't the Republicans' party choice. We remember all the controversy. They really wanted either Rubio or Bush. So long story short is I chose my leadership out of that manila folder. Joe Gruters, who was the Republican Party of Florida chairman, he kind of fought for me to get the position. I actually became the chairman before I ever went to an OCREC meeting. Because he said, now you have to go join OCREC. So I joined OCREC, which is the Orange County Republican Executive Committee. And I kind of think the rest is history because you have to remember my background, even in the LGBT community, was in special events. Whether it was when I organized the AIDS Walk team, organizing a Walk a Mile in Her Shoes for Harbor House. People all always saw me as a community organizer. They didn't really see me as a politics person until I ran. I mean, I ran the same year that I got this position. I ran against Patty Sheehan for, city council. Dumb idea. Don't ever run against a city commissioner.
Especially a popular one.
Don't ever do that. But, it was an interesting time because I actually learned a lot, and I learned what I shouldn't do and what I should do. And in 2016, after Pulse, a lot of people don't realize the president was ready to come into Orange County. He wanted to come to Pulse specifically. He's a candidate then, right? And so I called Mayor Jacobs, who I've known since 2000, back when I was still a Republican. And she said to me, and I'll say this now she's in a different capacity. It's not like I'm trashing her. She said, Randy, if you do that, I will call the governor, then Governor Scott, and I will make sure he's not welcomed at the tarmac. And I remember reaching back to the campaign with embarrassment. Because here he was. He wanted just to show up. And yeah, he was a candidate, but I knew as a candidate was going to win, right? But a lot of people in the LGBT community didn't support that. And a lot of people don't even realize he wanted to be here. And eventually we canceled that visit. He didn't come. And I think it would have been very healing for this community. I think it would have been a big step for him to be here. Because in the end, the funny part about that is 2 weeks later, I'm introducing him on stage as an openly gay man talking about Pulse when I knew there was a ton of people in this community that were furious with me because I was supporting this particular man for president. And it was so ironic is, of course, they wanted to say the reason I was doing that was because I wanted celebrity or something. What goes along with that? I mean, I don't even understand that.
Right. So let me ask you this. Why do you think the gay community was so against Trump? I mean, if you say because the pushback's about to come, but yeah. let me let you answer that. Mm-hmm. Why do you think the gay community? Do you think they just had the wrong image of him, or do you think that there was real reason why they didn't want him?
I think they just didn't understand him, and I think that what a lot of people in the gay community are conditioned to do is believe the only party that supports them is the Democrat Party. My 2 cents on that is I want conservative chief justices. I want conservatives because in the end, I don't believe for a second this president's trying to overturn Roe versus Wade. I don't believe for a second he's trying to overturn gay marriage and all those messages that come out there. I have learned in this last 3.5, 4 years now that there are tons of gay folks all over the country, all over the world that have figured out he's not coming after them. And when I hear people constantly reminding me that for some reason he's trying to take away this and that and the other, it's hard for me to understand that as a person who worked on the campaign, who has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for him, has done all these different things that I've done. And I'm thinking to myself, he's never once mentioned my sexuality. I've had multiple pictures. Of the 5 pictures I have with the president, 4 are from fundraising for him. And I have a feeling if I was such a bad guy, if he was so convinced that he didn't want to be around me, I wouldn't be anywhere near him.
All right. So in all fairness, let's take just the
here we go.
No, the conservative judges, okay, that he nominates for the Supreme Court. Regardless of what he feels, those conservative judges will decide on whether or not, if it ever brought back up before the Supreme Court to repeal Roe versus v. Wade or gay marriage. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't matter where Trump's position is at that time because the conservative
But you understand,
in
order for that ever to be brought before the Supreme Court, and there's a lot of powerful LGBTQ attorneys that provided me this insight. It takes an entirely new case that for some reason goes against everything that's out there, already been decided, for that court to take that up again. So how does that happen? What's that case? What's that look like?
So, let me go over some of the things that Trump has done or his administration has done against LGBTQ people, and this is why they were so against him. He obviously, the very famous ban on transgender people from being in the military, and while the ones that are in there are fathered in, there's no new transgender people who can join the military. His administration, or his attorney general, Jeff Sessions.
Let's break it down one at a
Okay,
time.
all right. So
Let's talk about that one.
let's do that.
Because, I have transgender friends. There's a lot of transgender Trump supporters. When I was coming up with my decision on how I was going to handle that, because I've told everyone from the very beginning, if this president does something that I specifically disagree with when it comes to the LGBTQ community, I'll be one of the loudest people out there speaking against it, because I did run his campaign in Orange County, and I have a feeling I have a responsibility to do that. One of the things that I learned was that many folks, and I your listeners, I know that if they're gay, they have to understand this too, is that gay people, I'm gay. I'm not bisexual. I'm not a lesbian. Last time I checked, I'm not any of the other parts of the acronym. Many people in the transgender community also agree with me that maybe a transgender shouldn't be, basically, for a lack of a better phrase, in the foxhole. That doesn't mean they're bad people.
All right. So again, then the question would be why? Why? Because see, the military has a standard, and if you meet those standards, regardless of whether you're a man or woman or transgender, if you can do the job, why shouldn't they be allowed to do the job?
Well, how do you know that? The reality is you're kind of capsulizing it right now. Doing the job, what does that mean? Am I mentally capable of doing the job? We all know that,
and physically.
Right. Yeah, well, absolutely. Listen, I'm all for anyone that wants to support this country. I totally am all in on that. I'm just saying that if the gay community wants me to believe that they totally are 150% supportive of transgenders in the military, I'm going to tell you, I think you're going to have a hard time finding that parade downtown. I don't think it's going to happen.
And here, you kind of lost me as far as the gay community, because the gay community, as far as a whole, I think are very much for transgendered people being.
I don't agree with you at all. I don't agree with you. I think one of the things I learned, especially coming out in 2002, now having been out, 18 years, I've learned that the LGBTQ community is actually quite secularized, even though we all kind of, the perception is from Equality Florida, of all these other folks, is we got to find a new reason to fundraise. We have to find a new reason to do this. The transgender issue is an issue for people in the gay community. It's difficult for them to wrap their heads around. I can't wrap my head around that. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I just can't wrap my head around it.
Well, I think that, we all live in our own little bubbles, and we surround ourselves with people who think like we do. Yeah. And I think that, I very well may have a perception that the gay community is very much behind transgender people. And I think you probably have people around you who don't believe they should be in the military.
Even back when I was leading the AIDS Walk team in the real bitches of Orlando in 2010, one of the largest fundraising teams that's ever been a part of that. I remind everybody of that because sometimes my community work gets kind of lost in the process. That was an issue even back then. There is always going to be that part of our community that I don't know, sometimes just I don't understand bisexuality.
Right.
I don't understand lesbians. I don't get all those things. But I also understand I'm just gay. That's right. What I am. And when we keep adding to the acronym, and we keep building and building and building, there's going to be parts of us that just look at it and say, I'm not sure I can get behind that.
Well, I think, and again, for my own position, whether I can relate or whether, I understand what transgender people go through, what bisexuals go through, what lesbians go through. We all experience things different because, as I'm a gay man. I do believe in fairness, though, and I believe that if there's a job, because this same argument was used against blacks, it was used against gays, it was used against women about why they couldn't join the military, and the truth comes down to is that if they can do the job, they're mentally and physically capable of doing the job. Why would you discount them and say you're no longer?
I'll just be candid. I don't believe you should be able to join the military in the hopes that maybe the country pays for your reassignment surgery or all these different things. I just don't think it should work that way.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, but it's no different than why people join the Army because they want their college fund. I mean,
it's very different. That's not even apples and oranges. That's very different.
We're spending the same kind of money that we're spending on their surgery. So
if you join the Army, Navy, etc.
Let me ask you this:
if you join the military to get your college paid for, thank you very much. Thank you for your service. If you're joining the military to get your surgery done, that's very different.
Okay, you say it's different as far as what it accomplishes, but it's the same money that's being spent. So if it doesn't matter if it's $20,000 for surgery or $20,000 for college, that's $20,000 the government's spending. So what does it matter?
It matters immensely.
Why?
We're talking about education over personal choices.
Okay, and those same personal choices that you say personal choices are what the religious right will say you and I made. We made a personal choice to be gay. That's ridiculous.
I'm not going to go with you on that one.
Did you choose to be gay?
I wish I hadn't. Wouldn't it be so much easier not to be gay?
No.
Sometimes I look back on my life and say, "Geez."
Wait. Wait. So I want to hear right now, did Randy Ross, are you telling me Randy Ross chose to be gay?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, that's what I want to clarify.
Don't take that excerpt. What I said is, I think it sometimes would have been easier if I wasn't.
Of course, it always would be.
Yeah, I waited until I was, you got to remember, I told you I'm from Indiana, conservative town,
right.
Pentecostal household. Didn't come out until I was 36.
Right.
I tell people all the time, sometimes it would have been easier not to be this way, but I can't change who I am.
Right. And so I would say that the transgendered people feel the same exact way.
That's fine. I'm not questioning that. I'm questioning whether or not they should be in the military.
Okay.
I think we kind of beat this to a dead horse.
Right.
What's your next question?
Well, I just want to say this. I get where your point is. My point is if they can do the job, I feel like they should be. We'll just have to agree to disagree on that one. Okay. Then, former Attorney General Jeff Sessions sent a memo that reversed the Justice Department's position on whether the Civil Rights Act protected transgender people from the workplace discrimination. So this is another one. Again, I'll go on to the next one because that, again, has to do with transgendered people. And not to dismiss them, but I know that you don't relate to them, and that just because
I didn't say that.
No,
I have a lot of transgender friends.
Right, and I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that you don't care about them. I'm saying that you don't relate. In other words, you're not transgendered, so you don't necessarily identify with their predicament and what they're going through. Mm-hmm. That you're a gay man and you understand that.
Right.
Okay. The Department of Justice, in accordance with Sessions' memo, submitted a number of briefs in state and federal courts around the country arguing that employers could legally discriminate based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Again, this is Trump's DOJ that's doing this. They removed guidances written by federal agency managers on how to support transgender federal employees. The DOJ sent 2 memos out to executive branch departments that interpreted religious liberty protections in ways that gave broad exemptions from federal anti-discrimination laws. The Department of Labor issued a directive to its staff to exempt contractors from compliance with federal non-discrimination rules that cover employment if they conflict with a contractor's religious belief. And so there's a couple more, but these are all things that are done from Trump's administration and his directive. And so you could at least understand why the LGBTQ community is not a fan of his, and that they don't see him as being supportive.
I don't agree with you at all.
How could you?
I know too many gay people that are huge supporters of this president.
Again, I'm sure there are, and I'm sure there are transgendered people.
So first of all, Jeff Sessions is no longer in that role. So
right.
You're talking about years ago.
Yeah, but we know why Jeff Sessions isn't in that role. It's because he recused himself, and Trump said, if I'd known you were going to do that, I wouldn't have made you.
Listen, there are way too many gay people surrounding this president, even now.
Okay.
Now. No, you got to be careful. You can't just throw something out there and not let me respond to it. There are too many gay people surrounding this president, working on his campaign, working in his administration, for you want me to believe that this president is somehow homophobic. Okay. Somehow wants to go against us.
So how do you explain all these movements?
I'm not even trying to.
I know, but then it's just ignoring them. It's like ignoring.
Is it real? I mean, has it happened? What in your life has changed? Let me ask you that. What's changed in your life as a gay man under this president?
Nothing.
I already know it's nothing.
Right. That's
You,
not to say
if you've got a 401k, it's better than it's ever been.
That's not just okay. So here's the thing: we're getting off topic with that.
Why?
Again,
Because you don't like the way I'm going with the topic.
No, wait. First off, you're getting way too defensive because
I'm not being defensive.
Because you're going off.
I'm walking into a Bernie Sanders supporting person that doesn't really like Trump, so I already am defensive. Let's be honest.
So and I told you I would be honest and upfront with you that there are things that Trump has done that I absolutely agree with. Okay, so I'm not like bashing Trump. But I told you I would call you out on Trump's stuff that he's done and that his administration.
Yeah, but you're bringing up stuff from a year ago.
It doesn't matter. These are
sure
things that are still.
What is happening right now in your life?
Wait! Don't speak over me, and I promise I won't speak over you. It doesn't matter if it happened a year ago or 2 years ago. It's been implemented, and again, while it may not affect us right now, we don't know what will happen down the road. We don't know what can happen from these actions. Just like him. And I want to get on to his spiritual advisor because I know you said you were friends with Paul.
I like Pastor Paula White.
Okay, so I want to talk about that as well. And again, I want to reiterate and make sure that I get across to you. I'm not bashing him. I told you I would call you out. So about the things that he's done. And there are, again, I understand that he has gay supporters, transgendered supporters, lesbian supporters of all types. But there is a pushback from the other side that don't like him. And you can understand why they have concerns. At the very least, you could understand the concerns. You may not agree with them, but you could see where they're coming from, I would hope. Just like I understand the people who do support him, like you, where you're coming from. I understand. I understand your pushback from the Democratic Party. I completely agree with what the Democratic Party has become, what they pretend to put out there. So I see it from both sides. But I will call out the left just as fast as I call out the right. I will call out Biden or Bloomberg or even Obama for that matter, or Hillary as fast as not faster than I would call out Trump. So so that I don't want you to think that I'm being unfair to you or ever would be, because that doesn't accomplish anything. So and again,
so what is the question exactly?
So again, it wasn't so much a question as I said, other than you can see why there would be people in the LGBTQ community that would be not very happy with him because of the actions of his administration, just in these actions alone. I mean, you could understand that,
but
right?
those what are those actual actions that have caused harm to the LGBTQ community? The only thing that really stands out consistently is transgenders in the military. That is the issue that I hear all the time. When I start asking people, tell me exactly what it is, people have a difficult time really articulating that. And that's why when I say to you, there's people that work around him. All these people work around him. If you really had an issue with gay people, do you think he'd have them around him in his administration?
Sure. I mean, I don't think that's unheard of. I mean, there are races who had black people around them to serve a certain purpose for them.
Are you calling him a racist?
No, I said there are racists. Don't do that, okay? Just like you thought I was doing it. I didn't call him racist. Now, if I thought he was, I would call him out on it. I don't necessarily buy into it. I think he's I don't want to say he's even, Islamophobic or anything like that, but I don't think he has his facts straight all the time. So before
you mean like Hillary Clinton, who was taking money from countries that were actually throwing gay people off of bridges and drowning them and burning them?
You think you're gonna get me to protect her or stand up for her? You got the wrong guy.
I'm gonna tell you. Here's the thing: in the most important county in this state during 2016, he stood by me and I stood by him. Okay. And I was the only gay person really out there in front. I tell people all the time, I took John Dallas's position. I'm the most hated gay man in Orlando. And the reason for that is because I support President Trump. And I still do. 5 years later, I'm still supporting him as much as I supported him when he came down the escalator.
So, all right. So let me just make one other point and then we'll move on to this.
Okay.
You asked me, how does it affect my life? I have my own business, so it hasn't affected my life. But for those people who can be judged as being gay and have what's the word I'm looking for? discriminated against because they're gay and say, you can't have this job, or we don't have to give you this job because you're gay. I don't have to rent to you because you're gay. I haven't experienced that, but that doesn't mean it doesn't go on and that there aren't gay people.
I will tell you, I wrote an article back in 2018, in Florida National News supporting Joe Gruters, who was the one that was with citing the Republican Party of Florida chairman, who, by the way, is the reason I got the chairmanship in Orange County, partnering with a Democrat in South Florida to make sure. I don't believe you should ever be fired, discriminated against at all because of your sexual orientation. That, to me, if I have to go fight one more battle, and I've already tried to support, when it comes to AIDS awareness and fundraising. I've tried to do it in domestic abuse, which to me is one of the biggest untold stories when it comes to same-sex partner abuse, having witnessed that and been part of that myself. If there's one more battle I would ever fight, it would be that one, because I don't believe you should be fired or discriminated against because of your sexual orientation. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but at the same time, it doesn't have anything to do with President Trump.
But it does. I just read to you how he made it easier, especially on the federal level, where they don't have to consider that they can discriminate when giving out contracts and stuff, that they go, you're not part of the protected class. So we don't have to do this. We can discriminate against you because you're gay if we choose to do so.
That's not really the language of that. That's not really the language.
The language is exempt contractors from compliance with federal non-discrimination rules that cover employment if they conflict with a contractor's religious beliefs.
Let me tell you something. I know a lot of rich gays that are getting richer off of this administration. So if you want me to believe all of a sudden that somehow there's a sect of people that are somehow being discriminated against, I would love to meet them.
Okay.
Because I'll be right there championing for them.
Again, because there are a certain group of gays who are getting richer off of him doesn't mean that others aren't paying the price off of
Who? Give me examples.
Again, I'm not one of them. So so you're going to do the Facebook thing. You want me to give you examples when I tell you that
I'm just telling you, I don't believe that your statement, even if it's what you're telling me,
it's their statement.
I believe there are people out there that are really doing really well. Gay people.
I don't disagree
so
with
why
you.
are we in this place where we have to talk about this all the time?
Because this is something that it was put in motion by his administration to be able to discriminate against gay people if it's in contrary to that religious belief of that contractor. That religious belief has precedence over your sexual orientation.
This goes back to the cake person in Colorado.
Right,
absolutely. Who wants anybody to make a cake for their wedding that doesn't want to make it?
Okay, let's go.
Find somebody else to make your cake.
I absolutely agree. I wouldn't want to give him my money anyway.
No way.
Okay, but let's go to a doctor who sits there and goes, "You're a gay man. I'm not gonna."
Then find another doctor.
Really? So if you're coming to the emergency room and you're dying, and the doctor goes, "But I'm not."
Okay, that's very different.
Okay, no, but it's not, because it's
in an emergency room. They're going to take care of what happens. If you're going to a doctor, it's very different. Listen, this is America. If you don't like the person that you go to, find somebody else.
But you're saying that it's different, and I'm telling you it absolutely is not. If under these rules, if that doctor in the emergency room decides not to...
It's not going to happen, and you know it.
No, we don't know.
So you're creating a ridiculous hypothetical.
No, I'm not. It's not ridiculous.
Tell me examples of this.
Oh, okay. You know what? Next time, I promise you I will have examples.
You have no examples because I've not heard of anything in the news.
Well, I hope...
Have I? Anything in the local... publications, anything that substantiates what you're saying.
Again, you're sitting there thinking that we live in this perfect world.
I didn't say that.
Okay,
it's a very unperfect world.
Okay, then I'm going to tell you that there are doctors out there who have denied health care to people.
I guarantee if that was true, it'd be all over the news.
It was in the news.
I haven't seen it.
Okay, I could probably take a second while you answer another question, Google it and find it for you. I'm sure it won't.
But
be
it
that
didn't
hard.
make it. Obviously, the mainstream media decided it wasn't important enough to keep it going.
Well, mainstream media, as Trump has pointed out, isn't being fair or necessarily truthful.
Are we going to talk about the coronavirus too?
No. Not really.
I hope not.
So, all right. So I do have some questions.
Oh,
All
okay.
right. So we know that he's made all these promises. He made a promise to release his tax returns. He made a promise that Korea will no longer be a nuclear threat. ISIS would be eliminated in 30 days. I mean, the list is long, and none of those things were done. And he lied about them. He's never released his tax returns. He continually lies. And one of the things that I find most difficult with Trump is that what he says about the media, for instance, is true. But what happens is people won't take him seriously because he lies so much that he's as bad as they are. And so they don't believe that the media is not reporting honestly because he's not being honest. And I go, man, if you would just be honest, they would believe the things that you're saying because what you're saying is true. The media isn't honest about things. And he's almost his worst enemy sometimes when he does that. And so how do you rectify, continuing to trust in a man who continually lies where I don't even remember how many thousands of lies he's been caught in so far since he's been, in office. I mean, does that bother you or do you just think that?
I think that the president is under a very unique microscope that
As are all of them.
I think this one is in particular unique. And it's unfortunate. In the back of my mind right now, I'm thinking of in the crock pot, did I turn it on high or low? Because I'm making corned beef and cabbage today. So I got to think about that. But no, I think he's under a very unique microscope. I think it's the same reason that even locally I get a ton of criticism is because anybody that goes in that particular frame of mind supporting him is also criticized. Listen, I believe that the president has done an outstanding job of pointing out how messed up our media process is. Listen, if it wasn't for Twitter, and I'm still glad he's on it, if you want the truth, if it wasn't for Twitter, we would have never have known so many of the things that we've known. Let me say, there are times where I used to wake up in 2016 and I'd be like, okay, what do you have to deal with today? That's an honest assessment. The flip side of that is I would wake up in 2016 and say, how do I deal with that? Especially as, because I had pretty much, I remember in the early stages of the campaign and I still had some gay people. I have a few still on my page, but I had some gay people on my social media pages and man, it was intense. I recall I had death threats. I had people that were, when I would go, there was an article that appeared, I believe it was in Instinct magazine or something. And I thought to myself, this is a community that I have supported, I'm part of, but you don't like my opinions and you don't like who I'm supporting, but you want me so far. I think people at times thought I was just going to go get in a corner and hide. I did the opposite, I look at all of that and I say, listen, the media is concerning to me. It is. I love what you're doing here today. It's raw. It's honest. I do a radio show every Tuesday night. It's raw. It's honest. It's obviously pro-Trump, but yes. But the reality of the situation is that this is all over in about 7 months. We're going to either reelect this president, which I believe we will, or we're not. And for my life personally, I'm looking forward to that finale. I'm looking forward to doing something different. When I took this on, I think a lot of people thought I was doing it for all the wrong reasons. Randy wants to be attached to the celebrity. What gay man in their right mind would have ever attached themselves to the Trump campaign?
Right.
Especially when I did it. So when people say that, I kind of I laugh about it, because I think, that's certainly so far from the truth. It's been such a struggle for my family, myself financially, personally, professionally. I could give you all kinds of examples how this has not been an easy road for me. The flip side of that is every once in a while I'll get a message from someone in the country that's a supporter that's gay. And they just say thank you. And that means something because it means that it's okay. You got to remember that when Mayor Jacobs was running for mayor, remember she had been a county commissioner for a few terms, and I remember going to a log cabin event, actually helping a local attorney organize that. And I remember Linda Stewart getting furious with me because I was part of that. But she didn't understand that I actually was a huge fan, remain a huge fan of Mayor Jacobs, now Chairman Jacobs on the school board, because, she went through her own journey. And I told you this on the phone. We were talking the other day when gay marriage was on the cusp of getting approved. I recall getting a phone call from Mayor Jacobs or interacting with her. And she was like, Randy, I had heard in a news story that they'd all showed up at a county commission meeting. I'm talking about the power lesbians. They showed up and they called her out. You must come out and endorse gay marriage. And I thought, who does that? And I remember meeting with her privately with Democrat and Republican gay people and saying, you don't have to do it on their terms. You do it on yours. And it was such a wonderful experience when she came around on her own. I think Tom Dyer eventually wrote the story and the watermark about that when she finally said, I'm a Catholic. My husband's Jewish. We couldn't be married in a Catholic church. My children helped me understand this a little bit more. It doesn't mean I agree with it. I'm going to go in this perspective. Let me tell you that in the Trump campaign, there were many people that I met with that did not agree with my sexual orientation. You have to understand, I was kind of plucked out to be in this role. There was, I remember the Manila folder, lots of people that applied to be in this space. A lot of hardcore far-right Republicans. I don't think I'm that. I don't think I'm a far-right Republican. I think I'm a moderate. I mean, I understand social issues. I'm going through an issue, and I think I mentioned this to you right now with my mom when it comes to healthcare regarding her being in a nursing home and what happened when she was going through her rehab with her hip replacement. And you better believe there's going to be a way that I get around that and do something about that. Just like what I did when one of my friends was dying of AIDS, I decided to be part of AIDS Walk.
You need a second?
When I had been through my own abusive relationship, I had decided to help raise money for Harbor House. I'll do that again in this space. Because healthcare, especially for the LGBT community, think about it. We don't all end up with somebody, right? I mean, we end up often lonely. And how are we going to be taken care of? I don't want to see my gay friends sitting in a nursing home drooling.
Right. So, okay, so let's get off of Trump just for a second and the Republican. Let's get to the Republican Party because you said you feel like you're a moderate Republican, and I'm sure that's a fair definition of you. How do you deal with the fact that you have a party who doesn't even want to allow you at the convention, like that doesn't even want you to be part of their party? Like they want your vote, but they don't really want you. They don't want the log cabin Republicans in particular to be part of the process.
I think that's a fair question. When I came into this space, one of the things I said was, as a gay person, if I do anything, I want to be able to change that influence. And let me tell you, it's not easy. I think that the Democratic Party takes advantage of the
oh, absolutely.
And I think the Republican Party pretends they like it, but they don't like black and brown people sometimes either. I mean, let's be honest. It's just the way it is.
So how do you change that from the inside? Like,
I don't know how to change it. What I can tell you is all I can do is do things like what I'm doing with you tonight, and talk about it. I think that the platform, when the president came out to accept the nomination, he mentioned for the first time, that's never been done by a Republican candidate, he mentioned the LGBT community. That's a start. Someone like myself that is in this space that's saying, you know what, we got to pay attention. We need gay votes, we need black votes, we need Hispanic votes, we need Asian votes. Because I believe in general, the parties are already morphosizing into something different anyway.
Right.
I am really, and I said this, I'm really more of a Trumplican. I don't know that I'm that hardcore far right guy. I'm just not. Just because my parents grew up, kind of taught me into that space. I met the other day with a millennial that is a conservative, and I was kind of like playing with her just a little bit to understand. Tell me what that means. How did you do that? You grew up and you went to University of Florida. your parents are both conservatives. You're telling me that they did not influence you. How did you come to this space? She talked about abortion. She talked about some of the issues. Listen, I think that the Republican Party, if they were honest with themselves, it's time to revamp that platform. It should talk about equal rights for all people. If they did that, it's not pandering. It's just America. It's honest. I think that's one of my frustrations. If you want the truth, I mean, I'm public about this. This isn't the first time I've talked about it. I said that, I believe that if I do anything, before this is all over, it was to bring awareness that it's okay to be gay and be a Republican. It's okay. Because it's also okay from Democratic perspective to do the things that they do, which I totally don't agree with sometimes, some of the socialistic approaches. I mean, I love capitalism. That doesn't mean I'm rich. Right. I mean, if I won the lottery tomorrow, do you know what I would do? I would get a motorhome and I would travel this country and I would interview people that were running for office. I'd be the Charles Kuralt. That would be my life. I would enjoy that. But the truth is that I think the Republican Party can do better. I have mentioned this to every person that I've ever interacted with at a high level in the party. Do a better job of inclusion with the gay community.
Do you think they want to, though? Because it's such you have these old white people who seem to be running everything who don't want it to change. They don't want to include gay people or brown people. They want to keep it as white as they can. And I feel like you're banging your head against the wall with these people.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment. When I, like I told you, when I became the chairman, I had to join the Orange County Republican Executive Committee. And I remember walking in, I think it was in November of 2015. And I walked into a bunch of old white people, and I didn't see any African Americans, as I recall. I don't remember seeing any Hispanics or Asians. And that was one of my goals. I wanted to see, how do we do this? How do we change it? The interesting part about it is the OCREC chairman was a kind of, I wouldn't say closeted, but he was gay. He had been in that role for 20 years. And yet I think they really found me to be, I still believe they feel this way. I think they looked at me and thought I was a replacement gay,
Right.
And that really wasn't because I don't think I'm defined by my sexual orientation. I think it's just I just happen to be gay. I just happen to be a little bit more conservative. I wasn't a big fan of what, was happening in the Democratic Party, but I never talked ill about Obama. I didn't say anything even mean or nasty. I don't believe you've ever found a document that I said something mean or nasty about Hillary outside of my speech, where I pretty much call her out for taking money from folks that, condemn and hurt gay people.
See, I don't think that's mean. I think when you're telling the truth, when you call someone out and you're speaking the truth, they can call it mean all they want. It's not. It's being honest. And if the truth hurts you, that doesn't make it mean. That just means that you're not happy with your actions.
Right.
So, so you mentioned that Trump was the first Republican to mention the LGBTQ community. And again, I think part of the conflict, and let me say this: I don't want to speak for the LGBTQ community. I'll speak for myself. One of the biggest issues I have with him is, and you said that you're friends with his spiritual advisor Paula White, is that he does things like taking his campaign rally to one of the most anti-LGBTQ churches in the country and takes his campaign rally there. That he has people that are part of this spiritual group of his who are very, very anti-LGBTQ, who, if they had their way, would outlaw. In fact, there's been, and I know you're not, that you've heard of these, and I'm not saying they're part of that group, but there are so many religious right-wing people out there who are even calling for the death of homosexuals, because the Bible says they should be stoned. And I find it contrary to, you can mention LGBTQ people, but when you surround yourself with people who are anti, how do you there's a conflict there. How do you associate with both of them and go, there's good people on both sides again? Because maybe they're good people somewhere in their soul, but if you're willing to kill someone just because of their sexual orientation, you're not as good a person as you think you are. And that's the conflict I have with those people that he surrounds himself with and considers them spiritual advisors.
I'm just going to tell you that my experience, whether it was I-4 for Puerto Rico, where we sent over 1 million pounds of aid, and she came to that event to support us. Whether it was I-4 for Florida, Pastor Paula White has been there through all those things. And I will also say that how can I possibly support a Democrat that thinks that, long-term abortion or 9-month abortions are okay too? I mean, I don't believe in that either. And I think as a man, I have a right to talk about that. I used to not think so. It wasn't until the movie Unplanned came out that I was like, I have a right to say something about that, because
Absolutely.
As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the spiritual folks, listen, a lot of people want to use Trump's past, just like they'd love to use mine, to say, you can't talk about that because you're bad and this is why you're bad. I don't know if I look at it quite like that. I think that he's making wonderful choices for this country. Like it or not, the economy's great, unemployment's low, and everybody, it's funny, when things are going great, Obama wants to take credit for it. And when they're not going so great, all of a sudden Obama pretends it didn't happen.
Well, they say the same thing about Trump, that when things are going great, Trump takes credit, and when they're not, he blames on Obama. I mean, I think it's both sides that do that.
It's kind of funny because, I remember going, the very first rally that I organized was in University of Central Florida. I believe it was in February of 2016. And a lot of people said to me, how are you comfortable when he talks about his wealth? Or how are you comfortable when he talks about this? I guess it's because I wasn't really envious of it, because he found a way to use humor, as did Eleanor Roosevelt, but he found a way to use humor to kind of deflect my envy. And it made it, I don't know, I've probably at this point been through 20 Secret Service background checks, probably been to, 60 or 7 rallies. I don't think there's anything like a Trump rally. It's like going and seeing, as a gay man, I can tell you, I went and saw Tina Turner and I went and saw Cher and I saw all these people. But there's something about a Trump rally that is just amazing. It makes me feel, you saw what I pulled up in. I don't feel, it's a brand new Titan truck wrapped in, because your folks may not see it.
They're going to see pictures, I promise you.
But I don't ever feel intimidated driving around in that. Now, listen, there are people I had a lady the other day, it's so funny. She rolled her window down and she just flipped me off, and she was doing this, and inside the truck, I can see them, but they can't see me.
Right.
And so it's kind of funny sometimes, because I find, and like I said, this kind of winding down this little journey I've been on, but I don't know if I would ever thought I would be in something like this at this stage of my life. You have to remember, I talked to you about this on the phone. I'd had a horrible beginning of 2015. I ran for office, in what was it, June, and then I was like, okay, well, that failed. What's next? And the next thing was this. And I say this because I think sometimes people need to understand, because I tell people all the time I have 9 lives and I haven't used them all yet, but never give up on yourself. You don't know what is around the horizon. For me, it just happened to be supporting a guy that nobody else was supporting, and he became president. It's not even always about everything he does is perfect. It's about, how did I end up in that space where I get to go along on that journey? This is history. I am a gay man. I am one of the only gay men in Orlando. I might be the only gay man in Orlando that got to go on a journey to elect a president. How many people get to say that? Even if they're Democrats, how many get to say that? That's, to me, is really when I hear about the critics and I hear about the people who don't agree with me. And I would say the same thing as I'm watching what's happening with Bernie Sanders, and I watch the president and what he's saying about this. I'm disappointed for the friends that I have that are Bernie Sanders supporters, because they're going through what we went through in 2016. Leading into that convention, I was meeting with state committee men, state committee women, all these people, because we were worried they're going to do exactly what they're doing to Bernie.
Right.
They were going to flip everything. So I am concerned that the Democratic Party has decided that it's Joe. And I'll be honest with you, I'm concerned not because we're going to lose. I'm concerned it's all but guaranteeing a win. Bernie would have been a much more complicated person to run against.
Absolutely. And the thing is you're right. And this is why I call out both the Republican and Democratic parties, is that to me, they're both corrupt, because it's no longer about whether you want, we vote
Right.
for somebody. If you have the most, votes, you should be the
I
candidate.
agree.
There shouldn't be some super
Will of the
delegate,
people.
that where the DNC or the RNC can sit there and rule over the people and say, oh, I know that's who you want, but we're going to put this person in. And that's just, it's undemocratic. It's
Right.
it's un-American as far as I'm concerned. And I think, and to Trump's credit, he said, that Bernie would be a harder person to run against, because Bernie's been consistent with his message. And it's just funny to watch the Democratic Party and a great deal of these Hillary supporters who buy into the whole thing and not realize they're more than willing to point out the corruption on the right, but they're not willing to take onus of their own corruption and admit to their own corruption. They just don't.
I had a good friend of mine. She worked on the Bernie campaign in 2016. And I remember telling her before everything fell the way it fell, I said, you know what, if we run against anybody, because I knew we were going to win. Even the media didn't know we were going to win, but I knew we were going to win. I'd rather run against you guys, because you had, and I say you guys, I'm talking about Bernie supporters, because you had the same grassroots kind of movement that we did. So wouldn't it be fun to figure out the victory came because those two grassroots efforts came to a conclusion and one of those won?
Right.
Instead of what happened on Super Tuesday, where you had, Buttigieg and Gobert, Amy, get out,
and that was all by design.
It was all by design.
Yes.
And it was really to mess with Bernie.
It was.
And I feel like in some ways that says a lot. The fact that many people and I'm not I don't agree with Bernie Sanders
Right,
on
I know you
politics, but I do appreciate that he's got this movement behind him. That's what America is all about, is that we get to do things like this.
Well, as I think I told you, and if not, I'll tell you now. When Trump ran, and here's the thing, you keep having these Hillary supporters who sit there and blame her loss on Bernie Sanders and his supporters. And I go, that's not why she lost. I'm going to tell you exactly why she lost, because the Democrats did not learn their lesson. The Democratic Party did not learn its lesson, just like the Republicans didn't back when Obama first ran and won. If they stepped back and just looked at the bigger picture, they would have seen Trump ran through the best that the Republican Party had to offer. I mean, he trounced all of them, because there was this desire from the people that we wanted change. We didn't care who it was. We didn't want the established politicians that
Right.
had been there and had their whole careers and family careers there. They wanted someone new. Trump represented that for Republicans, and because of that, he ran through them like they were nothing.
Right.
The Democrats, instead, like you said, we had Bernie. Instead, they forced Hillary down our throats. They cheated, and again, for everyone sits there and says, no, they didn't. I go, look, all you have to do is look at WikiLeaks and the emails between the DNC and Hillary's campaign and see that they absolutely cheated. They, it's no longer like, oh, do we know for sure? Yes, it's a fact. We absolutely know for sure. So they forced Hillary down our throats, and she lost because she was part of the corrupt establishment. And and people go, well, Bernie's been in it for 40 years. Yeah, and he's been fighting the corrupt establishment for 40 years. And that's why when you guys want to sit there and go, oh, he can't get along with anybody and he can't get anything passed. No, you can't. When you're the only honest person in the room and you're fighting all these corrupt politicians, you're not going to be looked upon fondly, and you're not going to get anything passed because they're not going to pass it for you. So
the president that we need in because I'm totally convinced Trump is going to win in 2020, but the president we need in 2024 is going to look very different. What Trump has been able to do is got us, out there, running around with our American flags again and get us. We need something quite different, I think, in 2024. And I tell people this all the time because they're like, well, Randy, who do you think is going to run? I'm like, I don't know, but it can't look quite like what we went through this time. Because we're human. There's no way. I'm still fortunate I have hair. See, you don't. Yeah. You lost your hair over the whole thing, didn't you?
I lost mine years ago over other things.
No, I'm just saying that sometimes when I look back on everything that it's taken to get to this place, I just know that, one, I do believe that I'm a soldier. I really do believe I'm a soldier in an army of trying to get this through. But I don't know what it looks like in 24. And to be honest with you, it would take a lot of money for me to ever do this again. Because I just don't know that I'd ever want to go down this road again. Just because of all of the, I live in a county with 150,000 more Democrats. I'm a Republican. I think it's 35,000 more independents. Back in 2000, there were only 800 MPAs in Orange County. Think about that. 250-something thousand, 800 20 years ago. This county has changed, okay? I think that our parties, the Democrat and Republican Party, are not reflective of that change. I do see us, unfortunately, leaning towards probably an open primary process where independents, there's no way you can have all these independents and not give them an opportunity to vote. It just doesn't make any sense.
They don't want to, though. They don't.
I think there's a lot of Republicans that do.
Well, I would hope that they get on board with that, and I hope that, but I don't see that happening because you have the Republican Party, the Democratic Party that has this. They have this power and this money, and they don't want to share it with a third party. They don't want to give up any of that.
I don't think I have a choice. If you want to win,
well, I'll tell you this,
because a lot of MPAs happen to be leaning more conservative. So of course I want to see them voting.
I will tell you this. I believe this. If Biden ends up getting a nomination, whether it's given to him or even wins it, we have another established, politician that's just going to toe the Democratic line, and nothing's going to change. Nothing.
You surely don't think Biden's going to win?
No. Okay. I was going to say there's a couple things I agree with you on. One, I don't think Biden can beat Trump. Not at all. And it makes me laugh when I see people going, "Oh, Biden's the only one who could beat Trump." I go, he doesn't stand a chance against Trump.
Do Bernie supporters stay home and not vote? Is that how it happens?
I think again, and I've said this on my other podcasts, young voters, get your asses up and vote, because if you don't, old white people are going to do the voting for you, and that's what your future is going to represent, is what they want it to represent, and you don't have no one to blame but yourself. It's that simple. I think that some of them, it's so much easier to get on Facebook and go, yeah, I'm for Bernie, but to get your ass up and go out and actually vote, that takes effort.
Sure.
And so if you don't put the effort behind it, you don't deserve it. And I said this to a gentleman the other night. I go, look, if the Democrats vote for Biden, I go, you deserve what you get.
Right.
If you're not smart enough to see the writing on the wall and see that you're fighting against a man who's been fighting for you, and you're going to vote for an established politician who has done everything against people, like trying to get Social Security cut, trying to get Medicare cut, and then sits there and lies and tells you, oh, we're going to expand it,
right,
and you want to believe him, then you deserve it for being stupid. It's that simple.
Do you think Bernie wins Florida or Biden wins Florida?
I think Biden wins Florida, unfortunately, because I think it's the older people who don't support Bernie because they're old enough to go, I don't want to pay any more taxes on anything because I'm not going to be around to enjoy it. So I'll be damned if I'm paying for it. Gotcha. And they're very self-centered like that. They think only of themselves. They don't care about, I've said this before. I have the best health care in the world. I seriously do. I don't need health care for all because I already have it. My college was paid for decades ago. I don't need to have forgiveness. I go, the thing is, and I'm not an immigrant, so I don't need immigration reform for me. But I do think about other people. I don't just think about myself. And you know what? If I have to pay a little bit more in taxes in order to make sure that every American has, health care, I'm willing to do that. But unfortunately, for many decades now, and I will say it's the me generation, where it's always been about me, and what does it benefit me? And if it doesn't, then I don't want any part of it. And we have too many boomers who are like that, baby boomers, who go, I'm too old. I don't have kids in school. I don't care if there are better schools. I don't care if there are better roads. I don't drive anymore. I drive very little. They don't care about those things. And I think those are the people who get out and vote against Bernie and will stick with Biden because Biden gives them more of the same, and that's all they care about.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but I do think you're right about 2024. And again, I said the best thing to happen to this country is that Trump won, not because of why you think, but because had Trump not won, I believe the progressive movement would have died right there. Had Hillary won, there would be no more progressive movement. And because he won, thank God, it kept the progressive movement not just alive, it grew because of that. And if we can continue to make that grow on the left and the right and have more progressives on the right who are sitting there going, look, we want to move this country forward. We don't want to, we want the people to have more of a voice in the process and not be ruled by, our overlords who sit there and dictate what's going to happen to us. I think we stand a chance of having the kind of country that we want. And
I sometimes wonder if more people didn't see the tweets or hear the voice, and they just paused and looked at their lives, would they really say, it's pretty good, let's keep it going?
Yeah,
and I think
I
think there are times, where I believe that, listen, I am a huge fan of this president. Don't get me wrong. There are times where he'll say something, and I'm like, I just wish you hadn't done that.
Yeah, but that's a great point. But but even if you're being honest, if people are being honest with themselves, I had a client, very Republican. Okay, when Obama got in, all he did was bitch about Obama. Obama doesn't matter. I go, listen, I know what life was like for you 4 years ago, and I go, he had his own business, a very successful trucking company, and he was just like barely making ends meet. He had to go out and drive a truck again after years. I mean, because he had to keep his company afloat. When Obama came in and the economy started to bloom again, his business bloomed and he was doing great. But I said, be honest. I go, are you really going to tell me that you're not better off now than you were, back when Bush was in office? And he had to sit there and go, oh, I guess I was. And I think you're right. If people would just step back and say, look, where's my life at right now? Is it doing good? Let's give Trump credit where credit's due, but let's call him out when we need to call him out. But we should do that with all of our politicians. These aren't sports teams, so we shouldn't be able to.
It's funny you say that though, because sometimes I think politics is a little bit like professional wrestling.
It is.
There's fake blood.
Right.
There's all this, all this stuff, but in the end, somehow these people all get along with each other. I don't even know how they do it.
Well, and I do because they're all the same ilk, and that's the thing. And I go, here's the thing. I personally believe the biggest traitor, and again, and you might not agree with me, I think Mitch McConnell is the biggest traitor to this country, and Nancy Pelosi is probably right behind him. I said.
Then I would add Val Demings, Stephanie Murphy, and Darren Soto.
Yes. And let's not forget Harry Reid and a few others. However, what I would say is this: if somebody said, if somebody went and God forbid did something, so killed Mitch McConnell, for instance.
Right.
I guarantee you,
Nancy
Pelosi would be the first one up there going, "He was such a great man."
Yeah.
Aren't you the one who called him every name in the book, the other day? But now he's such a great man, and it's because they've got to coalesce together. They've got to stick together because they know that they're all of the same ilk, and so they can't condemn one another because then they'd have to condemn themselves. Nancy Pelosi.
But don't you give Trump a little bit of credit for pointing all this out?
Yes, that's what.
If he did nothing else, he has reminded us how messed up Washington is.
This is where I have the issue with Trump. I agree with you. I agree with Trump 100% when it comes to when he pointed out the corruption and said, this is what's going on. And he knew it. And I was like, he's absolutely right. But then he goes, I'm going to drain the swamp. And then he puts the worst people that he could possibly put in these situations. You don't put the people who are head of Goldman Sachs over the banking industry. You don't put the head of which oil company was it, Exxon or whoever, over our environmental EPA. You don't put you just don't put the snakes in charge of those things. And so while he called them out and I applaud him for it, then he goes and does the same thing.
I think it's a balancing act. I mean, that's one of the things I've learned even in local politics, but certainly at that level is I wish that there was a perfect way to handle this. But I think sometimes he has to bring some of those folks in. It's kind of like this bargaining thing, that they do. And listen, like tonight, Val Demings and Vice President Biden's wife are at the LGBT caucus event. I think it was either last night or tonight. That's all about posturing. It's all about positioning.
Of course it is.
And it's about making the gay people think that Val loves them and all this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, guys, you don't understand. You're being used. You're totally being used again tonight, or whenever the event was. I think it was tonight.
It's funny that you said it, because I agree with you. I think that they are being used. And I also think it's funny that a few months back when Bernie Sanders wasn't able to make it to the LGBT conference or whatever, where they were going to have a debate or whatever, and he was the only one that couldn't make it because he was already committed to one at a black conference or whatever. And I said, he's been fighting for gay rights for decades, long before Hillary Clinton and Obama came around to, finally accept it.
Right.
I go, he's been fighting for it for decades, and you want to sit there and say he's anti-LGBTQ because he didn't cancel his event with them. I said, could you imagine if it didn't? Black people would sit there and go, oh, he doesn't care for black people because he went and took care of the gay people, but not us. And so
I think what we have to pay close attention to, at least from my perspective, we already know who our president and vice presidential reelection process is. We have to pay very close attention to, let's say Bernie wins Michigan, Bernie wins, something else, and it changes the whole makeup. But the vice presidential candidate on the Democratic side is going to be more important, in my opinion, than anything we've seen in a long time.
I agree.
Because it's either, and I'm going to take a prediction, it's either going to be I doubt that they're going to choose another white person. It's probably going to either be a black female or Hispanic female or Hispanic male. But those are the demographics totally lost in this process. When I walk into Orange County Republican Executive Committee meetings, like I said to you the other day, they still are not reflective of this community. Even sometimes when I was a DEC member, Democratic Party person, I didn't really think the board was really reflective of this community. This community has changed. Orange County is very different than what it used to be. And I think that our presidential candidates, and that's going to happen all the way back forwards, I think we've got to make sure that it's reflective of this country. And I think that's why they're going to pander. I'm not saying it's right. I think they're going to pander in position and posture because they want. We got Trump, he's 70-something years old, white man. You've got, Vice President Pence, older white man. They're going to try to appeal to the other parts of this country, and it's going to be tough. I mean, I felt one of the biggest weaknesses that we've had on this campaign, and it's not because I haven't tried. It's that we've done a bad job with the black community, bad job with Hispanics, bad with Asians and gays. There are times where we have wonderful victories. There are times, however, where I think, okay, we could do so much better. And I think when you talk to me about, Randy, why do you still do this? I think it's because I really believe somewhere the good is going to come from all this work. But guess what? If November 3rd comes and I step away from this and say, because I'll never work on another presidential campaign. This is it for me. This is the last one. I say that like as I knock on your wood desk, but I say it because the sacrifices have been too great. I don't know I would do it again.
Well, I will say this. I had a client who was a Catholic priest, and he was gay, and I said, how do you reconcile the church's position on homosexuality and you're being a gay priest? Mm-hmm. And he said, I want to make change, and I felt like the best way to do that is from the inside. Now, as you know, that change is slow, if at all. And so I think that, again, going from the inside, taking that mentality, I'm going to be an insider and change the party or change the church, I think is one that's not just lonely. I think it's next to near
I think there's no secret. I'm going to run for office again. I'm going to be a much louder voice. I just won't work in the capacity that I've done it now. I definitely will come back and figure out a way to become a much stronger voice, because I believe there's a lot of good that's in the Republican Party. There's a lot of good in the conservative movement, but there's a lot of things that need to change. And I think part of that means you have to be willing to acknowledge that gay people are okay.
Right.
I mean, I think that's the, I mean, if I could tell you how many women that I've interacted with on the conservative side in this campaign that have said, Randy, we're going to fix you up with a woman. And I'm like, okay, do you understand that's not going to happen?
Yeah, sometimes I don't
not
think
gonna. I don't think they want to believe it because I think they still believe it's a choice.
Right.
I knew when I was a very young kid that I was gay. But I also understand and I respect when they say that in their mind, in their religion or whatever, that they just don't get me, and that's okay.
I think a big part of that is because the Republican Party does pander to the religious right. And I don't think you're ever going to get the religious right to ever accept homosexuality. And again, that's their belief. That's their right.
Right.
But when they have such a stronghold on that party, again, you're fighting an uphill battle,
That's why I think
that
more
change.
People, not Randy Rosses of the world, people with far more influence than myself, but when they start really like the chancellor or the ambassador to Germany, when they start seeing, think about Ellen. I mean, break it down just a little bit. When Ellen became more acceptable, Will and Grace, when it came out, all these things, being a little open about being gay became a little bit easier.
It did.
They don't realize how much they've done because in 2002, when I came out, I was frightened. I drove by the Parliament House no less than 12 times. I was meeting a friend there. Drove by it. There used to be able to park across the street. I don't know if you still can anymore, but that was back in 2002. I drove by like 12 times, and I walk in and nobody has their shirts on. I'm like, I had this like little shirt on. I'm like, okay, this is how this has to be. So and that was in April of 2002, and I remember the next day I went and hired a professional trainer. I used to weigh 225. I lost all this weight. I booked a cruise from Barcelona to Ibiza on myself, going out of the country for the first time because I was experiencing this freedom that I hope now, when we talk about the LGBT movement in general, I think now it's a lot easier to come out now than it was.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't have to stand outside the Parliament House for, drive back and forth 12 times to feel comfortable enough to come in.
Before they had paved that, there used to be a drive that you could drive through where the pool's at and everything, and there was there was parking in there, and you used to be able to drive all the way around.
Oh, my parents stayed there once when we were kids.
Oh, really?
When we were kids, it used to be a Holiday Inn, I think.
I actually used to drive through there, and I didn't dare stop because I was so far in the closet, and I lived over in Volusia County, and I wouldn't visit any places over there, even though there were some gay bars over there, because I couldn't risk getting caught over there. So I would drive all the way to Orlando, and then I didn't even have the guts to like stop and go inside. I just drove through, and I still was so worried that somebody would see me pulling out of the out of the parking lot and go, "Hey, what's he?" Like anybody from Volusia County was going to be driving by at that very second that I pulled out and see me.
I think the Parliament House is great. You saw an interaction I had with Darcel Stevens.
Yes, I did.
Privately, I'm a huge fan of hers.
Yes.
Listen, there's nothing, when my family, and we do it sometimes incognito, but I've told you I've only been there a couple of times since I've been on this campaign, but there's nothing better than going and watching a great drag show at Parliament House. I don't care what anybody says.
She's the greatest MC. She really
absolutely is. Amazing.
I want to have her on the show as well.
You should.
Yeah.
Now, she won't agree with me politically, but we've talked about that behind the scenes. I mean, when she was running for Miss Continental at Large, I think I mentioned to you that I sent a friend over there with some money to donate that night. I didn't want to get involved in it because it wasn't fair to her for me to be a distraction. The flip side of it, I think she's wonderfully entertaining, and I've taken my mom in there. I've taken all my family in there. I love Don and Susan. They're great people, and it's a very safe, it used to be, it's not safe for me anymore, but it used to be a real safe place for me to go. Now if I ever go, it's so rare and it's with fear. And
I don't agree with that. I don't think that you should, again.
Oh, come on.
I agree that that you have a valid reason to feel that way. What I believe is that in the LGBTQ community, we sit there and we say, we should be inclusive and accepting of all. And if we believe that, then we need to practice that. And again, as you and I have talked about, as a community, we hate being judged, and yet we're the most judgmental people I've ever seen towards one another.
Absolutely.
And so, if we're going to preach this, we need to start practicing it, or we need to look in the mirror and go, we're hypocrites. We can't sit there and preach one thing and do another. And so, I think there's people can disagree with your politics as I do. But I would never sit there and want to cause you bodily harm just because we disagree. That's childish. At the very best, it's childish. And so, we should be able to have civil discourse. We should be able to disagree and still have respect for one another. As I had told you before the show, you're an intelligent man. I can't sit there and just simply dismiss your beliefs and your feelings just because they differ from mine and call you a name because I don't like your politics. It's
I think
not
if you
very
ask
adult-like.
me what defines my political mindset, I would do a Ben Franklin balance sheet, and I would say pros and cons of being a Republican, pros and cons of being a Democrat, and I would end up with more pros. Now I know that the Republican Party should do a better job. I just know that.
I think that's important. People hear that because a lot of times, I think again, we always get to hear the voices of the extremes,
right? And
we don't hear those of us who are in the middle. And so, you admitting that there are cons to the Republican Party, just like we should admit there are cons to the Democratic Party. But instead, all we hear are the extremes on both sides, and we need to take the mics away from them and bring it back to the masses. And I think because we'll find that we have more in common than we do different, and and that we can find common ground and live in harmony.
Oh,
and
I can tell you, if you want to go, if you're a conservative gay person and you want to see how the gay community perceives pro-Trump comments, go to Instinct Magazine's Facebook page or some of these things, and it's like, I can make a comment. I can be real simple in the comment, and it's like this. People just come crazy after me after it, and it's like,
do that to say anything bad about Hillary. Anything just say, Hillary's. Just say Hillary's, cheated or Hillary's corrupt, and they'll say she's been the most investigated. I go, I didn't say she committed any crimes.
No, I
said
don't
there's
do
corruption
that.
and criminal. She's still corrupt, But say anything like that, and
you're
they want your head.
And I think that at a local level, we have that very unique dynamic going on where we happen to have the first city council gay commissioner who's been there, 20 years. We have a very pro-gay community. Just like, I want to make this as clear as possible. When we opened that office across from Pulse, that was not my decision. That was a decision made by the Republican Party of Orange County. They were given that space. I knew once I realized, I heard about the office and I went to see it, right? When I realized where it was, I totally understood why the gay community, not because of Trump, just because that was a bad time. We're going through an election, right? People perceived him as being anti-gay. It's literally, you could look out the front of that office and you could see Pulse, and it had just happened. I realized all that. I look back on that, it's one of the poorest decisions that we made. We still ended up winning, but the reality was the way the gay community perceived that was like, I think they thought I was the one that was leading the decision to be across from Pulse. Barbara Palma and Rosario Palma are friends of mine. I would never have intentionally tried to do something to interfere with this grieving process that was going on in our community. It just wasn't in my, that's why we closed it almost as quickly as we opened it, because it was just really bad idea. Sometimes things aren't always, They look good on paper. It's nice that you're getting an office given to you, but in the grand scheme of things, you can't take it for free anyway. So there's got to be a payment involved. And I look back and say, I remember the day that we took Laura Trump, Diamond and Silk, and these are people that are Trump's folks, and we were going to take the Trump bus, and they wanted to go privately to Pulse. I was with them. We'd gotten this beautiful wreath made and all this stuff, and I said to the bus driver, I said, you're going to have to pull way down this street because this says Trump on the side of it, right? And I didn't realize, of course, we're probably being followed. And they pulled the bus up. And this is on that side street between Dunkin' Donuts and Pulse. And we get out, and I'm assuming he's going to move that truck on down the road. In minutes, I start hearing the click of cameras and the setting up of equipment. And then, of course, there's a picture from someone taking the picture that looks at the Trump bus next to Pulse. They didn't realize that what the intentions there were very genuine, but they came off extremely political. And there was no way for me to reverse that moment. I feel like in the end, it was good that we did it. But when I look back on that too, I think maybe not the best of choices at that time. If the president flew, I remember after the president had won, he became the president, and he was coming into Orlando, and it was 2 weeks before the Pulse 1 year anniversary. And I had called the mayor again, and I said, the president's coming in this time, because they were still using me as a liaison to the process, and she was furious. She said, it's too close to the Pulse. I said, he's now president. He doesn't need your permission to come here. As a matter of fact, if you don't want to be here, she goes, Randy, if you do this, and I would say if she was sitting in front of me, she goes, I will go to the governor, I will call the White House, and we ended up, he did not come here. That to me is not cooperative. That to me is a problem. Do
you think that they were being sensitive to the LGBTQ community, that because of the timing, and that there may be many of them who would find it offensive?
Why is it offensive?
Again, if they, as you said, perceive him as being anti-LGBTQ.
But how does he fix that if we don't give him a chance to?
There's a
good,
that's a good point.
I think that if he wants to come in, do you really believe the White House was sitting there pausing and saying, okay, wait a minute, it's 2 weeks before Pulse? I think what he was trying to, I think he would have probably went to Pulse. One of the biggest pushbacks I get from a lot of people is, why has the president not been to Pulse? And I would say to Barbara Palmer and everybody on the Pulse team and the One Pulse Foundation is, have you guys invited him? There's going to be a point where they've got to recognize, especially if he gets reelected, if you really want change out of this administration, make him part of your change. Invite him and let him turn it down. And you get to say, we invited the president and he didn't come. Or what, but I know behind the scenes, what a lot of people don't realize is that they didn't want him here the week after the Pulse tragedy. They didn't want him there a year after he'd won in the Pulse anniversary. So how do we ever change the dynamics of this relationship if we just keep ignoring these folks?
Well, I think that both sides need to, he could do better at on his end as well, and that's, again, because I know you can see this as well, is that when you have this division between sides, mm-hmm. that he doesn't help himself when he's campaigning before he's president, and he's inciting violence, telling people, oh, throw that bum out, go ahead and hit him, and I'll pay for his your legal fees. Mm-hmm. When you're using that kind of language, you're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. Now, after the fact that he's become president, I would think that he would go, look, I need to step up. I need to quit with that rhetoric, and let's but. I tell people, Trump is a businessman, mm-hmm. and he thinks like a businessman. Mm-hmm. That means for him, you win at all costs. So when you think there are things that he's doing that's immoral, unfair, in the business world, that's what they do, and that's where his mindset is. I've got to do. So when he sat there and said, when he was asked, well, would you take any type of not advice, but information against mm-hmm. your opponent, if it was given to you by a foreign leader, would you take that and use it? And he goes, probably. And I go, well, there may be rules and laws against that. For him as a businessman, that's what he would do. If he had that kind of information against, another contractor, he's going to use it to his advantage, because that's how you win in business.
Right.
And so I understand his mindset. But he also needs to understand he is the president. He's not running a business, and he needs to appeal to all the people, and he needs to reach out to them as much as you were saying, the leaders here need to reach out to him. And it's a two-way street.
I will say this, and I've said this a little bit earlier. I'll say it again. The president we needed in 2016, the president we're going to get again in 2020, that's a particular type of person. We have forgiven a lot of his indiscretions, a lot of the things that have been alleged, all those things. We prefer his policy. We prefer his platform. Out of all of his marriages and everything, we prefer him. 2024 is going to require a different type of, I would say that we're going to settle down. I think what he's done is he's kind of gotten us all like moving and shaking. And
So-
in 2024, it's going to be a different type of president.
So forget about the Democrats just for 1 second. Do you see the Republican Party going back to what they were before Trump, or do you see some sort of evolution there where you still have a grassroots candidate who runs and that the Republicans will support?
All I can tell you is I hope we don't go backwards.
I agree.
I mean, one of the reasons I left the party in 2002 wasn't just because, Carlos Carbonell and other, gay leaders were saying, how can you be a, Republican? It was because they were so far right. I was like, that's not me. Because gay marriage was important. And for a lot of people, it wasn't my priority. My priority was just being treated like a regular guy. Right. I don't think it's a Marco Rubio we go back to. It's certainly not.
Please, no.
It's not. What's his face from Utah? Jesus, Romney.
Yeah.
I sadly believe it's going to be some reinvented person somewhere in the middle. I don't know if they're Democrat or Republican. I don't know how to define that. I love the family, the Trump family. I don't see us ever. You think I would drive around in a truck like this with, Ivanka on the side or Don Jr.? I love them to death. They're great people. You won't find this type of enthusiasm, in my opinion, in 2024. What you will hope, Americans are going to want is just calm us down and keep us going forward. Who's that going to be? I don't know. I think it's certainly not. I've even said recently that I don't believe the Democratic nominee is on the stage yet. If they start realizing that, Biden's a little bit losing his mind and Bernie's not going to get it, somebody might just come out of the woodworking and get into the process. And that's a whole new space for us as a supportive base to figure out. Even the other night, the president said he thought it was going to be Bernie. And I think they were preparing for Bernie. And now it's looking like Bernie's not going to be that person. So I think we take the next 4 years.
I wouldn't count him out quite yet. Let's see what happens.
I think he's got like a 10%. Listen, they were counting Trump out too. So who am I?
Right, exactly.
But I think they said he's got like a 10% shot to figure it out. But I think that the Democrats, if they really wanted this to work, would have been better off just to see who got the most votes. Right. And just left it alone.
Exactly.
Because I think Bernie supporters are going to look at this and say, screw this whole thing. Let Trump have it. Let's see what happens in 2024. We both know it won't be Bernie. It's going to have to be a totally reinvented person. One of the challenges I think the Democratic Party did this time is they just brought back the old guard.
Exactly. They didn't learn their lesson.
Yeah.
And that's why I said, just like the Republican Party back in 2008 and 2012, after Obama was elected, the Republicans go, hey, listen, people, we heard you. We made a mistake. We won't repeat that mistake. And that lasted for about 2 months, and they went right back to their old ways. And that's why they lost in 2012.
I think Romney was a bad candidate, too. So.
Yeah, well, yeah. Again, there's no change, and I think that's the overwhelming theme throughout the past several years is that people still want change. They still want change, and as we're getting more and more change, we want more and more change. And I think it's going to continue to take progressive candidates who are no longer part of the establishment to win these elections. And if the Democratic Party doesn't listen to the people this time, they're going to lose. Of course, they'll blame it on Bernie supporters and Bernie again, but I sit there and go, it's because you didn't listen to the people.
Well, I think the census is going to give us, in the 2020 going into 2022, especially if we get 3 new congressional districts out of it, it's going to give us a rude awakening here in Central Florida. It's going to be able to illustrate to us that we have got to take this I-4 corridor much different. It's not just about winning the I-4 corridor. We can't win Orange County. We can't win Osceola County. I'm talking as a conservative process. That's going to go Democrat. And I think sometimes the folks sit there at the state level and they're like, okay, well, we're going to lose here, so we're not going to put money there. We're going to win here. We're going to, that's not really an effective approach.
I agree.
If you really want to win, you go into everything thinking that you can win it. I had someone recently say to me, well, Randy, you guys won the presidential preference primary, but you didn't win Orange County. Tell me where I ever said we were going to win Orange County. I never said that. I never said that because I knew better. I was in a little bubble, operating in this little space, and I think that's what we have to focus on is how do we, 2024 is going to be interesting. I will wait to see how the Republican Party and Democratic Party kind of process this. I think that we're going to see a lot of people that are going to start looking at things and saying, I don't want to be part of either one of these things.
Yeah, I think that's going to be it. It's like, out of this, I think maybe we'll finally get this third party that we need. And see, we've been conditioned to believe that this is a two-party system for decades. And so, and people go, why doesn't Bernie start his own, his own party? Well, there's two reasons. Because we've been conditioned to believe that only one of the two major parties can win. That's number one. And number two, even if he did start his own party, then you would call him the spoiler because he would take votes from you and you would still blame him and his supporters for you losing the presidency. And so no matter what he does, he's
But they
not
did
going
that to him by keeping what's-her-face in there, Warren.
Right.
That was intentionally to keep him from getting votes.
Of course it was. And I
mean, we're not rocket scientists, but we can figure this out.
Right. But these diehards who refuse to admit that there's anything wrong with the Democratic Party or their candidates or they don't want, again, they'll point the finger at you, they'll point the finger at the Republicans and Trump, but they won't look at their own dirty laundry. They don't want to see it. And I just don't have any time for people like that. It's like, look, we have to start being honest. We have to have honest discourse with each other. And one of the things I appreciate about you today is saying, I look at the pros and cons of the Republican Party because they have both. Yep. The Democrats need to do that too and go, we have pros and cons. And you can sit there and go, yeah, well, our cons aren't. I go back to like when Clinton was in office and he perjured himself. And I said, you want Trump impeached. You want him removed from office, but you didn't want Clinton removed from office when he was impeached. And you want to sit there and go, well, what he did and what Trump did. You don't do that. Either it's an impeachable offense or it's not. When someone breaks the law, it's either you broke the law or you didn't. And if you're impeached, then remove them. But you can't sit there and go, well, his crime wasn't big enough, so we didn't have to remove him, but Trump's was, and we should remove him. You don't. I
think that the Democrats have really done themselves a disfavor in that impeachment process. Listen, I don't know if I listened to every phone call, if I was in every meeting that every president has ever had, there might be something about them that's uncomfortable. Right. The question is it really worth what they put the country through? The cost. When Val Demings walked in holding those papers, as one of the impeachment managers, I felt she was totally being used. As a black female, I felt like she was being used. They wanted her walking in that, and she didn't see it like that. I think Nancy Pelosi and them, they might have saw it like that.
Right.
Here she is walking in as if she was delivering this document of doom. Right. When in fact, it was a phone call that maybe, I don't know if it did or didn't appear to be perfect. What I do know is it sounds like it wasn't as bad as, I've listened to all that stuff. I watched every day. Well, and I was like, this is nuts.
So before we close, because I know that my listeners go, why didn't you talk to him about the fact that, they withheld evidence and they wouldn't allow,
Wait a minute, though. That started in Congress.
Right.
Started in Congress.
All right. So here's the thing. But they said they were protecting the witnesses. But again, Trump wouldn't let Bolton speak and stuff like that. And again, they're going to, and I don't want to go down that road. That's why I'm saying I know people are going to sit there and go, you should have challenged him here. And I know the places I could have challenged you, and I don't feel that it serves a purpose because it really doesn't. What I do believe is that, it's going to take this discourse that you and I are having and having civil discourse and be able to listen to one another and process what each other is saying and still, find common ground, but still be able to disagree.
And I thought we found a lot of common ground.
We did. And that's what and that's what I have faith in my listeners that's what's going to be, they'll find this common ground as well and not go, oh, Randy Ross is this bad guy, because I don't.
Randy.
Right.
I don't Marsha.
Yeah, exactly. So I can already tell you but I can tell you there's going to be the hardcore, Hillary supporters out there and Democrats out there who are going to give me shit for even giving you a voice. And I don't
know. Somebody tonight told me not to come.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, I had 45 minutes on the phone with him, and there was a lot of opportunity where you could have just made it seem like it was going to be uncomfortable. And I've never felt, I've always been very open, but I've had to strategically continue to move people out of my life from the LGBT community because they just so disagree and choose not to try to understand. It's not that I don't like gay people, and it's not like anything like that. Somebody the other day said, Randy, it must be impossible to get a date. And I'm thinking, no, you don't understand. It doesn't quite work like that. I think that, we just have to figure out that the Democratic Party is really no better than the Republican Party in a lot of ways when it comes to the gay community. And I think both of them, whether it's fixing the pandering or trying to pander a bit more, okay, something there has to change, because my values might be conservative, but I'm still kind of into some of the social issues. I get it. I understand it. And I talked to, about my mom and what's going on with healthcare. That's a big point for me. I could see me talking to Anna Escamani about that. And there's not a lot I agree with her or Carlos Smith with. But I would love to see them trying to really get into this healthcare issue. So those are places where I put aside my personal, politics. Listen, and I said to you on the phone, there are a lot of people that, Rob DeMonico, who is a friend of mine. I don't even know if Rob lives here anymore, but years ago he said, Randy, you're one of the most misunderstood people I know. Part of that is
Rob.
when you put yourself out there, whether it's leading this or leading that, or you either are responsible for the success or you're responsible for the failure. And when things are successful, people want to see you fail.
Right.
It's just a weird thing. So by the time I got on the Trump campaign, I think that people didn't like Republicans in general, certainly didn't like that I was in this role. And as a result, they wanted to use all these daggers. But the flip side of it is, I hope somewhere down the road, people look back and say, there was this gay guy. He ran this Republican campaign for the president of the United States. He helped him raise hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's a positive thing. How many gay people do you know that get to do that?
Right.
I'll look back on this as a lifetime of wonderment, really, in a lot of ways, because as bad as I said this earlier, as bad as my life was going in 2015, look, an opportunity came up. And hey.
Well, I think whenever you do anything that amounts to change, anything that's above what normal people do, and you succeed or even fail for that matter, you're always going to have critics, and you're going to have, on that, you're going to have people who criticize you, you're going to have people who praise you. So no matter
I call
what
it Tanya
you do,
Harding politics. There's a lot of people running around with that pipe.
Oh yeah.
Ready to hit Nancy Kerrigan, but not that I'm Nancy by any stretch of the imagination. I'm probably more Tanya, if you want the truth. But did you see the movie?
Yes, I did.
But I think the bottom line is, as long as somebody's out there working and trying to affect change, they have my applause and they have my support. Sit up behind your computer and do nothing. I can't support. I have no time for people like that.
Yeah, exactly. If you're just going to sit on Facebook and sit there and play a troll, you have
Well, you're not affecting.
Right, exactly. They think they are.
Well,
That's
just
the
like
thing.
I loved Arcel, but when she shared that post the other night, I think she thought she was going to get a ton of traction, and she didn't get a lot of traction. I've seen other people, Wanzi has posted a lot of things negative about me, and I just don't play the game. I don't get into the fights with these folks because I think Wanzi's incredibly talented. I've gone to many of his shows. I think he's amazing. But when he says, something on a Facebook post like, somebody contact Randy's family because he's having a mental breakdown, otherwise he wouldn't be supporting this president. And I'm like, okay, that's awkward and odd. And I would never do that to him, or any of these other folks. I guess maybe it's one of the wonderments about getting older, at 54, is that you don't play as nasty as you used to. I did used to play. The Randy 10 years ago is a very different Randy
I agree.
than this Randy today.
I think that happens to all of
I
us.
think,
Yeah.
and you know what? It's a gift.
It is.
It is a gift.
But
It
I'll
really
tell
is.
you, there's still times where I have to pull back because I'll catch myself playing nasty like that, and I go, you just can't do that anymore, Kurt. Because it's again, you get old enough and you go, it doesn't serve a purpose. It's not helping,
and it
matters.
doesn't fix anything.
Right? Exactly.
I think that a lot of people do think that. They think that if they get nasty enough and everybody's like chiming in and liking their comments or doing this, social media. I remember in 2008. That's when I think I got on Facebook. I remember it being almost prohibited to be kind of mean to people.
Right.
And then by 2012, when I created this political page, it was like, oh my God, people are okay. And they can get away with it. People can say whatever they want about you on social media.
Right.
It's not defamatory. It's not, now 2020, 8 years later, I don't know. I don't know if I want that history out there of me being that mean to, I never
Right.
did that to my exes. I don't want to do it to my friends. I don't want to see other people do it, but a lot of people think it's okay. So what are you going to do?
Well, not everyone's as old as us, so maybe they'll grow up and they'll stop too. Again, I can't sit there and say I haven't been mean because I actually lost a couple people who I would have considered acquaintance friends, / friends. And one of them was very prominent in the gay community, and he's just, I called him out because he was just being him and his partner, both his husband, were being so ridiculous with their statements about Hillary that I go, I'm just not going to stand by and allow you to continue. It's one thing you can have an opinion, but if I know for a fact that you're pushing this false narrative, that you're pushing these lies, I'm
Right.
not going to let you do that. Not
Sure.
on my page, And so, I probably could have handled it a little better. In fact, I have my best friend probably tell me I could handle it a lot better, but I didn't.
Yeah.
And therefore, they're no longer friends, acquaintances. And I'm okay with that because I don't want to be associated with people who aren't honest and associate with people who deliberately know that they're hiding something and do it because they think that the ends justifies the means. And I just don't believe that because it causes more harm than it does anything. So.
Well, as we're wrapping this up, one of the things have you ever read the poem, The Dash, Your Dash?
No.
Because I realized how insignificant my dash had become with the gay community when I got on this campaign, because how quickly, your dash is that time between when you live and you die. That's your dash. Because, I see people and all of a sudden they've passed away and I'm like, they get a little blurb in something and that's it. We forget them, right? I think my dash in the LGBTQ community is a little bit more substantial than a lot of gay people want to give it credit for. But at the same time, I'm not angry that they don't acknowledge the dash anymore. It's just part of my life. I never really thought when I was doing these things that there was going to be a trophy at the end. I felt like it was, first of all, it was a lot of fun. I was having tons of fun when we were doing that AIDS Walk team and tons of fun actually organizing for Harbor House for Walk a Mile in Her Shoes. But I knew in some way it was always going to be this weird space of, Randy making it all about him. See, that's the problem with being a leader, and so that's why when I abandoned this at the end of November or beginning of November, and this is all over, I'll take a look around and I will do something else, but who knows? It may not even be here. I don't know.
Well, at the beginning of this podcast and the introduction that I have for you, I said that you're one of the most polarizing and controversial gay men probably next to Milo Yiannopoulos that I'm aware of. And but here's what I will say and what I said in the introduction, and I believe this because after speaking to you on the phone, I said, Milo is a provocateur. Mm-hmm. He deliberately says things that I personally truly believe that he does not believe in. He mm-hmm. just says it because he's that's his shtick. Mm-hmm. You, on the other hand, I believe that you have convictions and beliefs that you don't say something just to be provocative. You really mean those things and you really stick by those. And so for that, whether I agree with you or not, I have respect for it. And I know, again, people are going to be up in arms about that, and I don't give a damn. So, here's the thing. I'm going to give you the last word. If you have a website or anything, or if you want to say vote Trump or whatever you'd like to do.
No, I just want to say thank you. I mean, this is, it's really the first time that I've gotten to talk about it. I've written a number of articles since I've been this open gay Trump supporter. I've obviously, done certain things, but in this community, I've had to be quite quiet to a certain extent when it comes to the LGBT community, because it wasn't going to help the president, certainly wasn't going to help me, and I knew for a fact that most gay people were not going to pay attention or listen to me anyway. So I appreciate you letting me come on and talk about it. It doesn't maybe change perspectives, but at the same time, I feel like it's kind of cathartic for me, because I think often what people think about me is maybe a little bit different than what I am. My favorite thing to do, like I said, I'm going home to make, I'm waiting for that cabbage and corned beef, spend time with my dog. I love just being home. That's one of my passions, just to be at my house. And so I think I'm a little bit different than what people might sometimes perceive. It doesn't mean they're going to like me. Listen, I get it. You either love me or hate me. It's right there. But at the flip side of that is, I'm really not a bad person. I'm just drawn differently.
Right. And again, I've said this before about my podcast. I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and I'm not attempting to be everyone's cup of tea. You're either going to like our show or you're not going to like the show.
Right.
But I will tell you this. I will always be honest. I will always be upfront with everybody.
Right.
And so even if you don't like what I have to say, at least I'm speaking the truth, or at least what I believe to be true.
Right.
And and I don't think you can not respect that. I respect, again, I don't agree with a lot of things that you said, but I respect it because I understand where it's coming from.
Right.
And what more can you say? So
there we go. Well, thanks for having me on.
Brandon,
I appreciate
thank
it.
you. And I'll tell you what, when you decide to run for office, come back and see me and we'll talk about that. Okay.
Oh, that'd be interesting, won't it?
All right. Well, thank you very much. And folks, thanks for listening. And until next time, take care.
Thank you.
The Powers Project.